Hello and welcome to today's KDP University's At Home with Grant Faulkner. I'm Trisha, and for the past 4.5, actually 5 years, I've moved around Amazon's books team, learning the business so I can share it with authors. But we're not here to talk to me, we're here to talk to Grant. Oh, so Executive Director of National Novel Writing Month, also affectionately known as NaNoWriMo, the co-founder of 100-Word Story, Grant has published pep talks for writers, 52 insights and actions to boost your creative mojo, and the Brave the Page, a teen writing guide, along with other short stories. His stories have appeared in dozens of literary magazines and anthologies. His essays on creativity have been published in several journals, including the New York Times and The Writer. He also co-hosts Write Minded, a weekly podcast on writing and publishing. He received a BA in English from Grinnell College and his MA in creative writing from San Francisco State University. But he feels like he should have an MFA in novels about people doing nothing but walking around, a PhD in collages and doodles and stick drawings of fruitless pursuits, or a knighthood in insomniac studies. Welcome, Grant. So I want to start out with, in your intro, we heard that you're the director of NaNoWriMo, or National
Yep.
Novel Writing Month. What exactly is National Novel Writing Month?
That is such a good question, and I could fill the hour talking about it actually, because I think NaNoWriMo, as we call it, is many different things. I think the shorthand for it is, I always say it's one part writing boot camp, one part rollicking writing party. And it's really interesting on both of those levels. I mean, it's the boot camp in the sense that you're writing a 50,000 word novel in 30 days. So you have to write 1,677 words a day, which means you really learn how to show up every day and write and to push the limits of your writing, and to think about things like time management, like how are you going to weave in writing in your daily life during November and hopefully beyond. And then the rollicking party part is we have this vast, wonderful, vibrant, rollicking, whimsical community that literally spans the globe. And so this takes a number of different forms. If you go on Twitter or most social media during November, you'll usually see the hashtag NaNoWriMo trending, or at least pulsing very quickly. And so that's one way to engage. Our website, we get a million different posts in our forums. So every topic under the sun related to writing is being discussed throughout the year, actually. We have year-round programming, I should emphasize that as well. But then we have 1,000 volunteers around the world in places, a lot of different places like Des Moines, Topeka, Tokyo, and they're organizing in-person writing gatherings. And so this really makes NaNoWriMo different than a lot of writing organizations because we believe in community and collaboration. So these groups, people come to write together. They're led by volunteers called municipal liaisons who are coaches, therapists, teachers, many different things, and they help people write their novels. And then we have another component where our Come Write In program, we work with 1,200 libraries to host similar writing gatherings. This year, of course, is going to be different. Those writing gatherings won't be in person, they'll be virtually, but I've already attended some and they're super fun virtually. They might even be more fun virtually because you bring in more people and everybody gets it's a different kind of intimacy, I guess, put it that way. And then we also have a young writers program, hence the book Brave the Page, which you pointed out, that is written for teen writers. And our young writers program, we have about 100,000 kids and teens write every year, and we work with 10,000 classrooms to teach NaNoWriMo. And I should have mentioned that during NaNoWriMo, not National Novel Writing Month, we have 300,000 people participate in addition to those 100,000. So about 400,000 people around the world will be writing, and this helps you write. Like, it's amazing how, like, when I hit a wall during November and I'll get on Twitter and I'll see all these people like encouraging other people on, and I feel like the whole world is writing, and it really is galvanizing.
Right, absolutely. I already have several friends that are so excited. I keep getting pings from people going, "Hey, I've signed up for NaNoWriMo." fabulous. And it's accountability, right? So
Yeah.
we're like, oh, we're going to write. And then, everything else takes a precedence. So this is something that accountability is really big with us.
Yeah, there's this great quote by Picasso, and he says that every child is born an artist. The challenge is how to be an artist once you grow up. And I think
Mhm.
to what you just said, many of us want to write as adults, but I think writing and creativity tends to fall lower and lower and lower on our to-do list. Life gets very
Mhm.
busy, right? We have a lot of
Yeah.
responsibilities. And so
Mhm.
NaNoWriMo, one thing that it is, it's make writing and creativity a priority for just 1 month. It's just 1 month
Right.
a year to make it a priority. And I think we owe that to ourselves.
Mhm. Absolutely. So just to clarify, NaNoWriMo, the actual month is November. So
November.
November is the month. Hmm.
So this is a great month to start preparing. It's a great month to go to the NaNoWriMo website to sign up. It's a great month to think about how you're going to publish your novel afterwards with KDP.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's
Mhm.
talk about that progression a little bit. So yes, the 50,000 words is during November, but right now there's a lot of activities that are happening to help prep for your book, right? Because it's not just sitting down and writing. There's a lot of prep work. So talk to me about some of the resources that are available right now to help authors.
Yeah. So just to contextualize things a little bit, this is a great time to prep, and we encourage people to prep. We have this ongoing conversation every year. Novelists are fascinating creatures, and NaNoWriMo is a creative experiment in premise. And I encourage people to experiment with their creative process every year.
Mhm.
And so there are some people who are they love planning, right? They
Right.
love really big, involved outlines, sometimes involving, 10 or so different products from Staples. This is wonderful, meticulous planning. I think I read James Patterson has a 20-page outline for all of his novels, single spaced or
Oh,
something
wow.
like that. So anyway, planning, great. Some people, on the other hand, pants. That means they come October 31st. They don't even sometimes know what they're going to write. They just start writing and see where it goes. In fact, our founder, Chris
Mhm.
Patey, has a book called No Plot, No Problem. So don't worry too much if you don't have a plot. The premise is that you can find your plot in writing it, in exploring your novel in your rough draft. But anyway, these are two different, very, very different types of people, right?
Mhm.
People are like this in real life too, not just writing novels. I happen to be what we call a plantser. I'm like right in the middle. I'm a
Right.
middle child also. I'm not sure if those two go together. But anyway, like I think when I first started writing, I was more on the pantser side, and now each year I do a little bit more planning. And I do find that if you have some planning done, if you know the direction of your novel, I always say you should plan, but not plan too much. Plan so that you
Mhm.
know the direction, but don't plan so that you take the mystery out of your novel. I like to write to the mystery. But this is all to set up the answer to your question. We have we essentially have another program called Nano Prep, and it starts in
Mhm.
September, and we have a whole curriculum called we have a whole it's a tab on our website you can go to see all of our Nano Prep resources. And yeah, we have a whole curriculum that walks you through week by week exercises you can do to prepare to write a novel. So yeah, we have a lot of resources on our website, and we're doing a lot of webcasts and podcasts and blog posts, everything we can to reach people. But then I'd say like the other thing, crucial element is our community.
Mhm.
There's different ways to learn. One is the sage on the stage approach, where somebody kind of giving you their wisdom. But the other one is
Right.
participatory learning. You're learning from your peers. And I think that that's the magic of NaNoWriMo, is that people are on our site right now or in person in their regions, and they're talking to other writers. They're swapping tips like this. A lot of people don't feel secure in their creative process, for instance. I know
Mhm.
I think that pantsers tend to always think they should be planners. It's that they feel very planners rarely think they should pants. This is like an
Right.
observation, a theory. So anyway, but I think it's good to find a way to feel secure in your process and
Mhm.
also experiment. Yeah.
That's really good. We often get questions, and we've heard from a lot of other authors that are successful full-time authors, and they mention the fact that their community is a huge part of it. That's where they find readers.
Right.
That's where they find tips. That's where they find that support. They find beta readers. That's where they find their editors through other authors. So this is from what I'm hearing, this may be a great way for them to get started in that space.
Absolutely. And I do want to say the indie author community is a true community in a way
Yes.
that I think it's different than the other. I mean, the other writing community, whatever that is wonderful too. But I find that indie authors, they really help each other out a lot. And I think there's
Hmm.
something about that. There's a bigger learning curve. There's more to learn and know. And you need that community in a different way, I think, when you don't have a publishing house. And so this is all to
Hmm.
say that I'm always so impressed by the indie author community, and it really syncs up with the NaNoWriMo community so in such interesting and wonderful ways, because the
Hmm.
NaNoWriMo community also, like, these aren't people. I mean, a lot of people have gone and gotten their MFA and they've taken writing workshops and read how to write books. That's great. But a lot of them they don't know other writers. They haven't gone to school in writing, and so they need those other people to learn from and to guide
Hmm.
them to resources. And so, yeah, the NaNoWriMo community, I find it the most encouraging and empowering writing community that I've ever encountered. And so
Hmm.
I think it's largely based. It's more encouraging than other communities because it's all about helping people reach their creative potential. It's not a competition about who's getting published or who's getting
Right.
awards. Like we really applaud people when they get published and get awards. But I think it's really about people really believing in helping people write that novel.
Hmm. So why 50,000 words? What's important about 50,000 words?
Should we go to 100,000 words, you think? Make it bigger?
You know what? I don't know. That's a bit, I don't know. We may have to make it a month and a half then.
Yeah, we'll have fewer participants, I think.
Yeah, I think you're
50,000
right.
words. Yeah, to tell the story, Chris Beatty, the founder, he kind of literally just kind of woke up one morning and decided he wanted to write a novel. He loved reading novels. And he looked over at his bookshelf and pulled out some of the more slender volumes. So think Catcher in the Rye or The Great Gatsby, books like that. And he did a rough estimate that they were around 50,000 words, and did some very sophisticated math, divided 50,000 by 30, and figured out that writing 1,677 words a day was doable, actually, so that you could write a novel in a month. And so he invited 21 of his friends to join him. And everything that we do in NaNoWriMo, they started that first NaNoWriMo, even though he had no intention of being a creative movement or an organization. But what
Hmm.
I mean is that they wrote together. If somebody didn't show up, it's the accountability you mentioned. You'd get a phone call and say, "Hey, you missed tonight. Are you coming tomorrow?" And then
Hmm.
they would also make writing fun. And again, this is the rollicking party part of NaNoWriMo, is that they would do writing games. And so, for instance, they would sit down and whoever wrote 500 words first would get a latte. The group would have to chip in and buy that person a latte. Then, after everyone had had plenty of caffeinated beverages, there would be the challenge that you cannot go to the restroom until you've written 1,000 words. Very effective. You need to get a lot of writing done. This is a really effective technique. So anyway,
Excellent.
they made writing fun and they made it a group endeavor. And part of it, them meeting in coffee shops and stuff, was that they would creatively support each other too. So if you go to a NaNoWriMo write-in, you'll always hear people shout out, like, "I've got this character in this situation. What should I do?" Or "I need a name for, this waitress at a diner." So it could be
Mhm.
small things or big things. Yeah.
Good. Again, that community to help people get through that writer's block.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the fact that you break down a big, 50,000 words, to get back to your question, break a big task down into small chunks and it becomes much
Hmm.
more doable. So yeah, writing a whole novel, that seems very formidable. Writing 1,700 words a day, not so formidable. So if you do it day by day, you'll get there.
Excellent. So we've been talking a lot about NaNoWriMo, but you're also an author. So do you consider yourself an author who participates and supports NaNoWriMo, or do you see yourself as the director of NaNoWriMo who also writes?
gosh, I don't know how I see myself. Can I see myself as both?
Yeah.
No, I'm fundamentally an author to begin with, I guess.
Mhm.
I felt very much like I was a writer as early as I can remember. My mother, when she'd lose me in the grocery store, this is back when parents lost their children in grocery stores and it wasn't a scandal.
Right.
Um, and anyway, she would inevitably find me in the little stationery section, and I would be looking, fondly or lovingly at the paper supplies. I loved notebooks and pens from a very early age, and loved writing stories and loved reading stories. But I more formally became a writer in college. When I was 20, I decided to be a fiction writer and really didn't have a plan B, and ventured out into the world just to write, and picked up all sorts of odd jobs, anything that would pay the rent and allow me to write. And somehow my profession led me to National Novel Writing Month, where I became executive director. And it's wonderful to have found a professional home that matches my creative pursuits. So yeah,
Absolutely. That
yeah,
passion. And it's
yeah.
evident every time I talk to you, it's evident that you just are so passionate, not just about NaNoWriMo, but about writing in books in general. So,
Absolutely. And I guess I'd say, if anybody listening is sort of questioning the practicality of being a writer, it is tough to find jobs as a writer. But I do want to say that when you follow your passions, like when I decided to be a writer when I was 20 or in my 20s, and I was waiting tables or working at bookstores, I didn't know jobs like executive director at a nonprofit existed. I didn't really know what
mhm,
nonprofits were. And this is all to say that surprising things will come up. It is a little bit of that hero's journey, follow your
mhm.
bliss. Not that I can promise anything, but it's amazing what comes up when you do follow what you're really interested in. And so I always encourage people, go for your passion, just go for it, find a way to make it work.
So what genre do you primarily write in?
Yeah, I write in several genres, but I'm primarily a literary fiction writer. So I write a lot of, kind of domestic, realistic fiction, I guess. I love the short stuff as well. I write 100-word stories and flash fiction. I do, though, dabble in other forms. I have a couple sci-fi novels that I've explored. And I guess these categories sometimes are a little bit mystifying to me. Although I think as writers, if we want to sell our books, we do have to put them in a category. But
Right.
what would be called, I guess, mainstream fiction. I'm writing a novel that would probably fit more in that category as well. Yeah,
Okay.
and I write a
Good.
lot of essays and nonfiction as well. So I always joke that I've written everything except a vacuum cleaner manual in my life, and that someday I will write a vacuum cleaner manual before I die. But maybe I'll make it into some kind of strange experimental novel.
There you go. We'll
Yeah,
we'll hook you up with Dyson. How's that?
yeah, that sounds good. Uh,
All right. Um, so let's talk a little bit more about NaNoWriMo. I know
yeah,
that we've got a lot of questions coming through. So let's start
cool.
at the beginning. How does somebody sign up for NaNoWriMo if they want to participate?
Yeah, just go to nanorimo.org. It's free. So just sign up there, and you'll be guided through the steps. But basically, I would say, focus on entering your novel for this year, so making it a project, and
Hmm.
also joining a region so that you will get emails about the activities in your local community. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's totally free. We will always be free because we want everyone to have access to be able to put their voice into the world.
Excellent. Um, sorry, I just had a
No,
moment. I'm trying to put my thoughts together.
you're being a fantastic interviewer here. So,
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
mhm.
So let's talk about the writing process a little bit. I think we always get a lot of questions about the writing process. And there are some individuals that feel like every time they sit down to write, every day, so they're going through and their goal is to get to that 50,000 within that month. Do you find it helpful that, every day that they sit down, do they go back and edit what they wrote the day before, or they just keep going forward and getting those words in, and then after the month is over, going back and editing the book? Or what processes do you see work well?
Yeah, I think generally, like it takes me a couple hours to write 1,700 words, and I don't really have any more writing time than that. We
Hmm.
generally tell people to focus on progress, to move forward, to focus on the exploration of your novel, to follow that mystery I mentioned earlier. And
Hmm.
so the premise in NaNoWriMo is not to get hung up on the editing, that to write a rough draft, that's what you're supposed to do. The rough part is supposed to be rough.
Hmm.
When I first started writing novels, I was one of those more perfectionist oriented novelists where I would write a first chapter and then I would sort of endlessly rewrite it to get it perfect. I felt like I had to get it perfect before I could move on. And what I learned was that, well, one, it held me up so that I seemed like I was never going to get to the end of that draft. But when I did and went back to revise it, oftentimes that first chapter would be entirely cut. So all of that time perfecting it was for naught, because I hadn't explored the story. And I always mention this quote by Joyce Carol Oates, who said, "You don't know the first sentence of your novel until you've written the last sentence." And so I think what that means to me is that you've really got to explore the whole story and see where it's leading. And then when you reach that last sentence, then you can go back and you know your first sentence. What's going to guide you in your revision. And so that's the kind of premise of NaNoWriMo, is to not get hung up on imperfection. In fact, to kind of glory in imperfection in a way. And that writing for quantity can lead to quality too. So, again, it's like I don't even consider that rough draft in November to be a first draft. I call it a zero draft. It's almost like you're planning your novel in a way because you're just exploring the storyline. So, and then
Hmm.
yeah, edit later. That then you've got the words on the page. You've got this fantastic editing playground waiting for you.
Right. So, how many people actually start and finish their 50,000? How many hit that goal?
Yeah, 15% just historically of the people who sign up hit 50,000 words. So this year we'll
Hmm.
have, 35, 40,000 new novels in the world as a result. So yeah.
So
And I do
after
want to say
that,
though,
oh,
can
go
I
ahead.
can I just say a lot of times people really get down on themselves or feel bad if they don't hit 50,000 words, and that, so I'll always hear like I only wrote 10,000 words during November, and I just want to say that writing 10,000 words, like let's do some math around that. There's a lot to celebrate there. If you write 10,000 words a month, that's 120,000 words a year. That's two pretty good sized novels.
Hmm.
And if you think about it in a different way, 10,000 words a month is like 300 words a day. So that's maybe, I don't know, let's say 15 to 30 minutes of writing a day. So, you can squeeze a lot into a small chunk of time and get a lot done. So just don't get down on yourself if you've only written 10,000 words in a month.
Right. Because it's 10,000 words that you didn't have at the beginning of
Didn't
that month, and you've started building that habit.
Exactly. You've built the habit, and I love this story. Toni Morrison, she was a single working mom. She had a couple kids. She lived in New York City. After coming home from work, she'd make dinner for her kids, help them with homework, and by the time she was done with her day, she had about 15 minutes left before she went to bed. And she used that 15 minutes, and she was, I think, 40 or so at the time.
Hmm.
But she used that 15 minutes or so to write every day. And she built that first novel by writing in just those small increments. So trust in the small increments you have available to you.
Hmm. Absolutely. So 50, the 50,000 words, we talked a little bit about, that's a pretty, it's a short novel, right? So
Short
it's,
novel.
mhm. So do we see, or do you see that a lot of individuals that participate, like they use that as the base, but then they write like for a second month, or and then publish in the spring, or do they publish right away at the end of November? What's that? What does that usually look like?
Yeah, there's a unfortunate myth in the traditional publishing world that all of these thousands of people who write in NaNoWriMo, that on December 1st they send their manuscripts in to be published. And I have yet to talk to a NaNoWriMo writer who has done that, so I don't know where this started. I think it's false. We advise people to edit. We believe in editing. We believe in rewriting. We believe in having beta readers, getting feedback, doing whatever it takes to actually perfect that novel. Invite your inner editor in after November. And like you said, I mean, 50,000 words often isn't a full novel. It can be, but it's not often. And I think a traditional novel is usually around 80,000 words or 75,000 words. So a lot of
Yeah.
people have to write more after NaNoWriMo. And you know, and novels go through multiple drafts. Most of them do. So yeah, you have to write, you know, sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drafts.
Mhm.
You know, we encourage people to, like I said, form writing groups, get beta readers, perhaps hire an editor, work with an editor, you know, do whatever it takes to make your novel what you envision it to be. So,
Mhm.
you know, a NaNoWriMo novel, we hear all the time, I'll hear an author say, oh yeah, I mean, an author that would publish a novel now say that he or she began the novel in like 2013, you know,
Right.
years ago. So yeah, be patient with your novel. You know, it's going to take a while. Yeah.
Especially if it's your first.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn so much in your first novel. Although I say that every novel is a type of first novel. It's like every novel is like if you have had children, every child is different. You can't just give them
Mhm.
the template of parenthood that you've applied to past children. So every novel is different as well. You've got to learn from that novel how to write it.
Good. All right, so we've got some questions coming in.
All right.
Let's start taking a look at some of these. Um, so we have a question about what other programs exist for young writers who want to write nonfiction topics. Now, NaNoWriMo, you know, it doesn't matter the genre, right?
Yeah, I mean, we focus on novels, obviously, but I think everything is a story, you know. To write nonfiction has storytelling elements in it. And it's all about really, it's about the challenge, the goal and the deadline, which we say is a creative midwife. So we say if
Mhm.
you call it a novel, we call it a novel. And we've had people write PhD dissertations during NaNoWriMo. We've had people write memoirs. We've certainly had people write nonfiction books and kids too. And so it's really, you know, we're all about helping people write. I'm not going to disallow someone entry into the NaNoWriMo kingdom because they're writing nonfiction. In fact, I welcome it. So I can't, I don't know. I mean, there are plenty of kids writing organizations out there. So I just advise that person to Google others if she wants to explore, you know, nonfiction in particular. But I'd say the basic framework, and we do have a whole website for young writers, and they can write on the website. There's a writing platform, so every word they write goes immediately into their word count. They get like things like digital badges. Adults do too. It's amazing what people will do for a digital badge. You know,
They
we like to
do.
be we like to be rewarded as creatures, um,
Yes.
no matter what our age is. And so yeah, so I would advise just go to the Young Writers Program and write there. You know, and on the website too. If you're a teacher, there are virtual classrooms so the teacher can see, you know, the word count progress of all of his or her students. So yeah, I would say stick with us on that one.
So let's talk about that for just a second. We really haven't focused the conversation on the Young Writers Program. What's the difference between the Young Writers Program and the National Novel Writing Month?
Yeah, they're very similar. We just have a different space for the kids. So they have their
Mhm.
own website, they have their own forums, they have their own community, they have their own writing platform, and then there are two different. You know, you can sign up just as a 13-year-old kid if you want to write,
Mhm.
or you can sign up through a classroom. So we have like 10,000 classrooms around that every year. We have a whole curriculum aligned to the Common Core if you're a teacher. We have downloadable workbooks for every different grade level. You can also access that if you're an independent writer or a parent as well. And
Mhm.
we just have a lot of resources, kind of similar to the main NaNoWriMo site. We have you know, we publish pep talks from famous authors. So this year, for instance, Elizabeth Acevedo, who wrote one of her novels during NaNoWriMo, she's writing what we call a pep talk, which is like a motivational letter that we send out to all the people participating. So yeah, the Young Writers Program, we just offered, resources and like Brave the Page, the book that we wrote, resources that are more focused on teen writers. But it's the same premise, set a goal and a deadline, and that's a creative midwife that empowers you to write. And the one thing I'll say about the Young Writers Program, they don't have to write 50,000 words, by the way. So they can set a word count that is is appropriate for either their age or their writing ability. So, some kids might write a 2,000 word novel. And what's interesting to me is that we hear from so many parents and teachers how even the most reluctant writers, kids who are the most reluctant writers, really blossom during NaNoWriMo, or often do. And I think that's because they get to choose what they want to write about, which is a rare thing in school, unfortunately.
Right.
And they get to pursue it with their passions. They get to just be imaginative. And these are great ways to learn to write. These are great ways to learn grammar. Like you build a sensitivity and a love for language. You build an interest in writing a sentence that makes your story work. And so writing a novel can be a great pathway to being a better writer in a lot of different types of writing. And we'll also hear from kids, they get an immense sense of confidence and pride in writing a novel, and sometimes many of our teachers or students will go to KDP and they'll publish that novel, and they'll have in-school readings, where kids, I went to a book fair once. It was great. The kids were lined up around the gymnasium and they were signing their books and selling it. So they were like professional authors, and friends and
Oh, that's
family.
amazing.
It was amazing. It was like so magical. And it's so magical for the kids too, because they're not writing just for the teacher or their classroom. They're writing for the world. And so they have
Right.
this sense of a bigger audience, and for all of us, any writer, once you've put your book into the world, it's an entirely different feeling than when your book is just on your laptop or with a friend.
Right.
And so to give
Right.
that experience to kids, I think it's really amazing and magical, and I want every student, every school to do it. And one thing I'll say also on that note, once kids write a novel, they feel like they can write a research paper is no problem, like a 10-page
Right.
paper. They're like, oh, that's easy. I've already written a novel.
Right.
So yeah.
I'm aligned with you. I think that all students need to participate once and publish a novel before they go to college. Because to your point, all those research papers, oh no biggie, I got this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say too that a lot of these beyond the classroom, I'll talk to like a 17-year-old writer, and he or she will have written 5, 6, 7 novels. When I was a teenager, I hadn't written a novel at all. I didn't know it was possible for a teenager to write a novel. And so it's amazing that these kids, and a lot of them are very accomplished indie authors too. Like they put their
Yep.
novel in the world and they're already publishing, and they already have an author brand and a website and all this stuff, and it's just it's amazing because they're learning beyond writing. They're learning these, you know, business skills, these real life business
Right.
skills that will, further them in the world.
Yeah, it carries on beyond just writing. I mean, if it's great if that's what they choose to do, but further, if they want to go into business, it's there, it helps them. Um, so we have a question about writing structure. Are there tools or assets that are available through NaNoWriMo to help with the writing structure?
Yeah, we have a book called Ready, Set, Novel that
Mhm.
is a great book about how to prepare to write, and has a lot of exercises in terms of like your plot, characterization, things like that, that helps very specifically like that. The Nano Prep curriculum that I mentioned as well, that's on the website, focuses on that in a different way. Um, so yeah, I would use either one of those resources. No Plot, No Problem, which is the book I mentioned earlier, written by Chris Beatty, our founder. It's more, I think, of it's a guide through the month. It's a really fun book to kind of help you develop the creative mindset to succeed during NaNoWriMo. So I think those are all great resources. My book, Pep Talks for Writers, it's 52 short essays on creativity. I initially wrote that because a lot of NaNoWriMo writers would tell me in November, they'd say, I had this great writing experience in November and I loved it and I want to keep writing all year round. I don't know how to do that though. And so my
Mhm.
book's premise is like to help people write every week of the year. Although I think a lot of those pep talks also apply to NaNoWriMo and getting ready to write So yeah, I'd guide people to any of those.
Now, we've been talking a lot about NaNoWriMo, and that's November, right? But there's more throughout the year. So when somebody finishes in November, there are still the community still there. There's
Yep.
other assets too throughout the year. Can we talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, I hope that that was people when I mentioned that somebody in December said, "How can I keep going?" I mean, it always frustrated me because I'm like, we're still here, the community's still
Hmm.
here, and so we've built that community and those programs to be year round, since then. So in January and February, we focus on a program we call "I Wrote a Novel, Now What," and so it's all about the now what. So a lot of people, when they've written their first novel, they don't know how to revise it. And so we provide a lot of revision guidance. We also provide a lot of publishing guidance. So that's whether you want to be an indie author or traditionally published, helping you understand what's entailed with both of those decisions. And, we try to help equip people and help them learn. There's so much to learn, no matter what path you take.
Hmm.
There's a lot to learn. And so we try to guide people through. It's really a labyrinth. I'll call it a labyrinth sometimes. So there's just so much to learn and so many things to do. So we do that, and then we have other. I mean, we have our websites also set up. So if you want to enter a writing goal, I always say our NaNoWriMo website is like Fitbit for novelists. You can enter a goal and track your progress daily. So it's just like Fitbit. A lot of people have a goal of 10,000 steps a day. You could enter a certain word count goal per day or a certain revision goal you have and track that. I will say though that we existed before Fitbit, so Fitbit is really like NaNoWriMo for walkers, maybe. But anyway, that's a different issue. And then we have Camp NaNoWriMo, which is a more casual version of NaNoWriMo, and that happens in April and July. About 75 to 80,000 people do that every year, and
Hmm.
it's more casual in the sense that it's not so novel focused. You can write anything. You can write an epic poem, a collection of short stories. You can write a set of 10,000 word goal or a 100,000 word goal. Anyway, it's just more open. And we're increasingly adding other what we call mini events during the year. So, might be a short story challenge. This year we did something for the lockdown called Stay Home Rimo, where we gave a kind of daily checklist of different kind of creative and uh, activities to get through the lockdown.
Hmm.
So yeah, we're constantly expanding our programming.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a question about short stories. What's an optimum number word count for a short story?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I don't think there's a true answer to that because every story, I think, demands its own length, or I think an author needs to decide what's the sufficient length to tell this story. So, I write little tiny stories that are 100 words long, but I also write stories that might be 7 or 8,000 words long. So the one thing I'll say though is that I feel like the word count for short stories in general is getting shorter and shorter, or it has during my life as a writer. And I say that because when 20 years ago or so, um, literary journals at least, the conventional length for a short story was like 7,500 words or 8,000
Hmm.
words. And I find now it's more like in this 5 to 6,000 word range. So optimal length, you might think of that as like a conventional length, I guess, to answer the question.
Hmm.
But I would really go with just like I think any form, write what's necessary to tell the story the way you see fit, So that could be 100 words or it could be 100,000 words.
Does NaNoWriMo partner or help writers with editors or publishing houses?
So we don't do that directly. We've done that with sponsors in the past.
Mhm.
So there are a number of great companies that are essentially like editorial marketplaces or marketplaces for graphic designers. I'm sure that you at KDP perhaps guide
Yeah.
people to some of those resources. So yeah,
Hmm.
I wouldn't turn to NaNoWriMo for that. We try to create the pathway to help you get
Hmm.
there, but we don't do that ourselves.
Right. And if you are looking for that with KDP, we do have resources on our help pages that will help you find the editors or the designers that you may be looking for.
Mhm.
Um, so Barbara's asking, she's a question about marketing. She says, I've been told from other authors that writing a book is just 95% or is just 5% of the job. The rest of the 95% is marketing. Is there any guidance on NaNoWriMo that helps people like her um, define a good marketing strategy?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think I hope that 95% isn't true, but it can definitely feel that way as a writer. There was this wonderful age of being a writer way, way back in history where writers just wrote and their publishers took care of everything else. And I think it's been a shock to the system that writers can't just write these days. And this goes for people who are traditionally published as well. Um,
Hmm.
you really have to be out there hustling. Most writers do. It's a very rare writer who doesn't market. And so it's become just commonplace. You go, if you follow any writer on Twitter or Facebook, you will see them
Hmm.
promoting their work. And a lot of us, we're not exactly disposed to that because we're introverts, We want to
Right.
just write, so it can be a really tough thing to learn how to do. I would say that NaNoWriMo, again, we provide a program and we provide a discussion, and you will learn a lot from people in our community. But I think like one basic principle of being a good marketer as a writer is being part of a community. Like
Hmm.
you're not just a broadcaster. You should be creating a conversation. And one great way to, I mean, I don't like the word market in this sense because I think it's just going to happen organically through you being a good person and a good kind of literary citizen to other people. But if you're part of a community, they will help get the word out organically. Other people will spread the word for you. And so
Hmm.
I spent many years not being part of a true writing community. And I've only really, in the last 10 years been a more energetic part of one. And I can't tell you, just how much that community's helped me in every way, but also just in like putting a book out into the world, spreading the world and doing it in a really nice, organic way. And also
Hmm.
learning from them too. So yeah, I think I would start there. And also don't make it all about your work. Celebrate other people's work. Spread the word for
Right.
them, and they will reciprocate. So the word marketing kind of you can take the marketing or that I don't know that senior side of marketing out of it. You don't always have to be selling, but you do have to sell too. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a way of doing both, I think.
So let's talk about, we talked a little bit about the smaller groups, the local writing community. How does somebody
Mhm.
find that? So once they get into the NaNoWriMo site, they've got the forum, all the other resources. So how do they find a local community on the forum?
Yeah, if you go to there's a community tab, and if you go to the community tab under that, there's find a region, and you can or you can and then you can find your home region. So if I live in Des Moines or in Central Iowa, I mentioned this
Hmm.
because I grew up in Iowa and I just spoke to the Des Moines region the other night. Um, you can sign up for the Central Iowa
Hmm.
region. And then there's a whole section of the website then that will list all the events that are happening in Central Iowa. You'll start getting emails only the people in that region get. And so
Hmm.
we have about 650 total regions on the website around the world. So you can you can find your people, and like no matter where you are. We so like if you're in Wyoming, a very sparsely populated state, um, especially this year now that everything's virtual, there will be a
Hmm.
region probably for the whole of Wyoming. I'm guessing we only have one location there. Um, but now that everything's virtual, really, that's one great aspect of this is that anybody can join in the region. It used to be, I think, more difficult, obviously, because of geographical distances. But we continue to expand that program. We love bringing people together in person as well.
So what if somebody goes there and there's nothing in their region? Is that something that they can help start or?
Yeah, definitely. So if you are living in a place like I'm just as when I said that you can anywhere in the world you can find a region. I thought, well, we have had somebody write in Antarctica before, but I don't think we have. I don't think we have a NaNoWriMo chapter there. But let's say that there are 5 writers in Antarctica,
Hmm.
and they want to have an official region, or there's one writer, and that one writer can start a region by contacting us and applying to be a municipal liaison. And who knows, that writer might start an NaNoWriMo chapter there and find 4 or 5 other writers in Antarctica who want to gather and write. It's possible.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
it's dark and cold there. You never know.
Perfect writing conditions. Yeah.
This is a really good question. What's the most important lesson your career as a writer has taught you?
Gosh.
And so you thought this was going to be an easy interview.
Yeah. I was going to say, I thought of a couple things. I think the thing that I've learned is just to believe in your story and believe in yourself. And it sounds so simple, and yet it's so difficult to do. And I think that you don't want to go to your deathbed having written stories that other people wanted or that you thought you should write. I think you want to find your story, and there's something so uh, beautiful and important about telling your story and telling it your way. And I think we all have such a hard time, finding out who we are and being that person in the world. But I think that there's a value in doing that as a writer that's beyond any sort of amount of money that you might get from your books. And usually I think the irony is the more you are yourself, the more you believe in yourself and your story, the more likely you are to create that pathway. Because I always say that, you know, our, we read because we want to connect with other people and other characters. And the more that an author is him or herself on the page, the more that you're vulnerable and writing from the heart, the reader's going to sense that, you know.
Hmm.
And so tell those stories and tell them, just believe in them, trust that if
Hmm.
you want to tell this story, that other people will want to read it. I think so oftentimes we distrust ourselves and we do things out of fear. And so that's one of the principles of NaNoWriMo is get rid of that fear. you
Hmm.
know write like no one's watching, dance like no one's watching, and you will be all the better for it. So yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, I think one of the themes that I'm picking up is that authenticity, the authenticity in the writing, the authenticity in interacting with the community, and that authenticity then is going to travel through your work to your readers.
You said it. I really believe in that. And I think that that's like going all the way back to that marketing question,
Hmm.
authenticity. People can sense uh, inauthenticity, even online. Like
Hmm.
the more authentic you are, I think the better you're going to be as a writer and as a marketer.
Right. Yep. So we have a question. I wrote a question and answer book on my life for my family. How can I develop it further into a novel? So that sounds almost like it's a good skeleton. So how would somebody kind of take that skeleton and turn it into a novel and flesh that
Yeah.
out?
So if I'm understanding right, it's a question and answer about like a person's life, like that person like sort of asked him or herself questions. So it's almost like a
It looks
memoir
like it.
of a
Hmm.
type. Yeah. So I think if you wanted to flesh that out into a novel or a memoir, I think I would identify the theme that you want to focus on, or the one through line. Like Trisha, you just said that you were picking up a theme in what I was saying, about authenticity. So I
Hmm.
bet you can do that through the Q&A. I bet there is a running theme, a pattern of either things that have happened or things that this person. You have to view yourself as a protagonist. You are now the protagonist if they're going to turn this into a novel. So view yourself as a character, really truly fictionalize it. It's really interesting because we're living in this age where there's a lot of what they call autofiction, which is people who it's a borderline between memoir and fiction. It's autobiographical fiction, and
Hmm.
fiction always has somewhat of an autobiographical influence, of course, but it sounds like this person wants to be very direct about that. But anyway, think about what the fictional boundaries are. But mainly, pick a storyline, or pick like one moment, and think about like in terms of it's just again, every story has these basic elements. A character wants something and can't get it right away.
Mhm.
There's a desire and there's a conflict and there's an obstacle or a series of obstacles. So think about you've got all this raw material of your Q&A. So start identifying that. Like what do you as protagonist want? What is standing in your way? How can you develop a narrative around that? How can you show how can you create tension and suspense? And think of it too, like I mentioned the hero's journey earlier, and if people don't know what that is, it's a book that Joseph Campbell wrote, and a lot of people use it to guide them through writing. But it's
Right.
basically he identified that there are millions of stories in the world, but they all kind of follow the same storyline. A
They do.
hero ventures
Mhm.
out into the world, and you think about it, in terms of like, The Hobbit or Harry Potter, whatever. The hero goes out into the world and encounters all these adventures, and then kind of has to go back with that wisdom of what he or she has learned. That's the shorthand for it. But um, put think about your life like that, and then you will make it into a story that you can write, whether it's a memoir or a novel. Hope I answered that. I felt like I was rambling all over the place.
No, I think that was good. I think that's good. The hero's journey is always, I'm always looking for, I analyze books. So I just reread Eddings, I don't know, David Eddings, and that's a perfect example of the hero's journey,
Yeah,
going out into the world. And so, yeah, being familiar and reading the stories that do the hero's journey well, I think would be helpful in framing the kind of Q&A. But um, all right, now I'm babbling. So,
you're not. You're not. I think I was going to say, because what you were saying reminded me of another layer to this is
Mhm,
think about the stories that you want your story to be like. Like, where does it fit in on the bookshelves of a bookstore?
mhm,
And it doesn't have to be the genre necessarily, but just, the writers you admire. And I love
right.
reading, like one of the ways I get ready to write my novel during NaNoWriMo is to read novels that are like the novel I want to write. And I do that in September and October as a way to brainstorm and a way to get
Mhm.
ideas. Also a way just to kind of create that mood and tone for my writing.
Really good idea. That's an excellent idea. Um, we have a question about how do you, what do you do when you've lost the plot or lost your motivation to write on a given day?
This is a good question. This is the $1 billion question.
It is.
Um, there are, because I think inevitably as a writer, you will have this day, could be a week, could be a month. I hope it's not longer than that, but sometimes it is. So,
Right.
writing a story is a very challenging thing, and it requires a lot of patience, and it requires, I think, a lot of like self-knowledge about how does one get back into it. And so if it's during NaNoWriMo, I think the focus is you want to keep writing. And so you might want to take a break, take a walk. I think sometimes we hit this wall because we've become so intense and focused on our goals. And that kind of closes our minds when we need to open our minds. So I would do whatever it takes to open your mind. That might be reading other books, listening to music, watching a movie, taking a walk, whatever it is, just take a break.
Mhm.
Um, in the larger sphere of things, though, in the end, there is a moment though where the answer is not to walk away from your novel, but to dig in. And so I do think that there's a lot of value that you find inspiration in the act of writing. You create inspiration, so don't just wait for it to hit you. If you hit this moment, I think this is where like a lot of the talk that I've had with community comes in,
Mhm.
talking about your story with other people or getting their support, or even them talking about when they've gone through moments like this will help you.
Right.
You won't feel like such an oddball or a loser or whatever it is you put on yourself. Don't put these labels on yourself either. Don't call yourself a loser. Don't
Mhm.
don't go into negativity when you hit the wall. Like, trust yourself that, I mean, sometimes I think when people hit the wall, it's a marvelous opportunity. That's the story telling you that this is a moment to go deeper. And so often people have those aha moments when they're in the shower or in an unlikely place. And so trust that that can happen. That's why I say go for a walk. if you're in an unlikely place, something might speak to you. And
Hmm.
just yesterday I was talking to someone who said that she likes to at these moments she likes to take a break and to actually talk with her characters, to find a way to kind of have a conversation and let your characters guide you through it. Don't think that you have to determine the story. Like, let them loose, and they might like guide you. Um,
Hmm.
Let me think. The other thing I'd just say is like we all, most of us write on our computers. Oftentimes, at this moment, I'll write in longhand, and it's just a different writing process. I'm outside of my novel, so I feel a little bit freer. And I've heard people like write something wrong. You know, write what you think's wrong. Write a scene that you don't think you're going to need. And at NaNoWriMo write-ins, and we have this on Twitter too, we have round-the-clock word sprints on Twitter. And what word sprints are is that I will come up with a prompt, and I'll say, write as fast as you can, 5 or 10 minutes. It's a speed writing game, and it's all about helping people to keep writing. And it's amazing when you do this. You can do this by yourself. I know writers who do it by themselves. How it there are thoughts and stories in your mind that you don't even know, and so this is automatic writing or improvisational writing, and I think it's a fantastic technique to keep writing.
Good, excellent advice. All right, so we are at time, but I have
Uh-oh.
one more question for you. Um, how do people get started? Let's go through that again. Just tell what's next
Yeah,
steps from here.
NaNoWriMo, NaNoWriMo.org. Go there. You'll find a sign up page. Sign up. Then go to enter your novel. You'll be guided to this page, and like, give it a title. You can give it a little, like, 1 paragraph summary. Anyway, you enter the project, and then you're an official NaNoWriMo writer. You're in our database. You'll start getting emails from us to help you with all this and guide you through the whole month. But then I'd say go to that community tab, find your region. If you're in Charleston, go to the Charleston region, sign up so that you can get communications about meeting other writers in your region. And I would leave it at that to start. Just do those 3 things, and
Mhm.
then you'll be led other places as you go through the experience.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this knowledge and helping authors kind of move forward and hopefully on their next project and being a part of this community. It's such an amazing opportunity and it's such an amazing community.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I hope everybody who is out there watching signs up and writes your novel. Believe in yourself and do it. It's fun. It's
Yep.
also a boot camp.
Yeah.
And explore KDP's resources too. It's wonderful to have a finished novel in your hand. It's a gift to write it. It's also a gift to publish it.
Awesome. And yeah, KDP is a sponsor for NaNoWriMo, so you will see resources coming from us if you're participating in NaNoWriMo. Um, but moving forward, thank you so much for joining us and everybody else. Thank you for all the viewers. Thank you for joining us today. Just a reminder, we are going to publish this on our YouTube channel and you'll get a follow-up email tomorrow. Um, just reminding you that it's there if you want to re-watch parts of this, like rewatch some of the amazing advice that Grant gave us today. But as always, happy publishing, everyone.
Thanks so much, Tricia. Bye bye, everyone.